Hi everyone and welcome back. So I hope you enjoyed engaging with some of the employers at the employer booths. So as I mentioned, first up we've got the University of Law, who is our headline supporter today. So we've got Fatmata from the University of Law, who I'll explain her own role a little bit later because there's something to it, there's a lot to it. But today's session, what she's going to do is she's going to bring to life some of the issues that Black students face in higher education and employment, and in particular what the University of Law is doing to help with some of that. So Fatmata, over to yourself.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to this very short presentation. Please feel free to put any comments, any questions in the chat box, and I will try and answer as many of them as possible. I'm Fatmata, Fatmata, and I am what they call a Widening Participation Coordinator. So what that actually means is that I work to support students when they come into uni to then help them do well. And I will tell you why that is really important on the next slide. But then also looking into employment, how can these students go into employment and essentially do what they want to do? So in this presentation, I am going to be focused, and I did title it Glass Ceilings and Broken Ladders, and I'll tell you why as we go on. But essentially, I will be giving you some information about the racial awarding gap, which is very important for Black students. But then I am also going to outline 3 different things ULaw is doing to tackle some of those issues. And then I will have about 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions. So within higher education, we have something called the racial awarding gap. You've probably heard about it in maybe sixth form or maybe secondary school when they say that, I don't know, Black Caribbean boys do not get as high of grades in comparison to maybe white students or maybe Asian students. We have a similar thing within higher education, whereby our Black, Asian, and minority ethnic students, they essentially get lower grades in comparison to their white counterparts. There are lots and lots of reasons for this, but I'm going to sort of tell you that one of the reasons that has been disproven is the idea that perhaps our Black students are coming into uni with lower grades. That's not the case. Even if a Black student and a white student come in with the exact same A-level grades, the white student still does better. So just some data from 2020 in percentage points. So some of you will be good at maths. So Black students have a 22.1% percentage gap in the number of students who are getting first or a 2-1. So for those of you who are good at maths, what that means is that if 100% of white students are getting a first or a 2-1, only 77.9% of Black students are getting a first or a 2-1. Just for interest, for Asian students, that gap is 10.8% overall. So that would then mean that 89.2% of Asian students are getting a first or a 2-1, so on and so forth. And I've made a little joke there. Hopefully you can spot the joke on the screen. But what this means and why this is very important to know is because a lot of graduate jobs and maybe even work experience schemes ask students to either have a first or a 2-1 grade, or to be on track to achieve that. Now, if we are seeing a massive gap between what our Black students are getting in comparison to our white students, what that means is that Black students actually, when it comes to employment, might not be getting the specific graduate jobs, or they might have to then go on to do a master's degree to then make up for the 2-2 grade, which obviously includes a lot of cost that not everybody has. So this is something that I think every student should know about, because when I was at uni many moons ago, this gap was there and I didn't know. I just saw my friends maybe just dropping out, or 20 Black students start, and then in the second year, or even in the second semester of the first year, there's about 12 of us now, because lots of people have dropped out, or people don't get the grades. So it is important to know this and maneuver yourself accordingly, but also businesses and unis and institutions should be doing something about this. And I'm now going to tell you what ULaw is specifically doing to help. So one big issue Black students usually have within higher education is the unawareness of different cultural experiences Black students might have. So it could be that you maybe have to stay at home instead of moving to campus, and what that might actually mean is that you don't have as much peer-to-peer support. It could be that you are facing microaggressions, or that there's institutional racism that you are experiencing as a Black student. And what this can sometimes mean is that you might then pull back, you might not be involved in lots of the things, it might be difficult to then concentrate, and which all leads back to the grades our Black students are getting. So what ULaw is doing about this is really, I think, is quite cool. And I'm not just saying that because I do run the scheme, but we have what's called a Bame advocate scheme. Now, the role of a Bame advocate is to support and empower Black, Asian, and minority ethnic students. So essentially, these students are paid to work with the university to create a safe space at the uni, so that students can voice any concerns, seek guidance, support, and also share their experiences. They then also look at data, conduct research, working with staff to improve the curriculum, so on and so forth. So why this is really important is because a lot of the time, the work done by institutions to maybe target race and racism or microaggressions is not usually informed by the people who those things impact. And that's very strange. It should involve those people, and this is why this is very important. The special thing about this scheme is that these are paid roles, so we don't just get people to just volunteer to help solve these issues. It's very important that people are paid to do this work. So some of the projects that the Bame advocates have done so far include doing student research. So actually looking into the opinions of students and essentially asking them, you know, what can we change? What can be done and then using that research and that feedback to change things. So for example, we are looking at how we can get our students to engage with our employability team. And we all know the issues about the term Bame, and that is why within research we break down every single thing. So we don't even just say Black, we say Black African, Black Caribbean, mixed, because we know from research all these experiences are different. Another thing that they have done is create an equality and diversity checklist. So what this does is that when someone is sort of designing a new project, or maybe designing a new module, designing a new course, they essentially have to then look at this checklist to see, is it diverse? Is it inclusive? Are the Black students going to find offense with something? Are the examples you are using perpetuating stereotypes, which is obviously very important because we are the University of Law. Another thing is looking at employability. So different things Black students face will be very, very different to what maybe white students face or what Asian students face in terms of work and employment. For example, I always have to think, okay, how am I doing my hair for this interview or for this assessment center, which is not something a lot of other students think about. So we have specific sessions based around the concerns and the issues Black students face, and we do have specific people who can help our students maneuver through this. They also review the curriculum, which I will talk about in just a second, but then they also have podcasts and newsletters, which is very important because sometimes culturally as a Black student, it could be at work or it could be at uni, you might feel as if sometimes your kind of culture or your ideas or just the things that are normal to you are not represented. So that is a very important part of the scheme. Okay, that's the first issue, is student voice. Now, the second issue is experience. And when I talk about experience, I'm specifically talking about work experience. Now, especially for specific courses like it could be medicine, it could be healthcare, it could be law. In those specific courses, you basically need experience to get experience. And a lot of the time, to do that, you do have to start very, very early. So early as in maybe college. Some people start in year 10 to get work experience and work placements. Now, if you are a Black student from a low socioeconomic background, talk a lot, you sort of might not know that you even need that experience, but then you might not know where to get it, how to go about it. So then by the time you get to maybe first year, second year, third year of uni, you are then playing catch up. So what we are doing about this is working with specific companies to provide our Black students specific work experience. So it is focused and it takes into consideration all the different cultural nuances too. So we work with a specific company that specifically only focuses on Black males. I have also worked with a company, quite a big company, I'm not going to name names, where they essentially worked with us to specifically tailor work experience. You would obviously still have to apply through us. However, the interview and the criteria is very, very different. So I removed all entry requirements because, like I said before, a lot of our Black students are not getting the first and the 2-1s. And actually, sometimes you do need that work experience to then help you be more motivated to get the grades. So I removed that. The interview process wasn't focused on skills you already had, which, when you think about it, is very strange for me to say, I am going to give Anthony work experience for him to then build skills that he already has. I'm not sure if that makes sense. What it should be is that you don't have these skills. We are going to offer you this experience to help you build those skills. So that's how we chose who was going to be on it. And what that does is that it then helps us pinpoint all the students who do actually need that work experience. And it is something we are working with different law firms and different companies about to actually consider when doing that. It takes a lot more work, but it does have a payoff. So the third issue Black students face in general is teaching. So it could be that you are a Black student and you are living at home, so you can't actually go in for that lecture that takes place at 9, not because you don't want to actually wake up, but it could be quite expensive to travel in peak times. Or one of the issues students have is the curriculum and the fact that A, it's not usually culturally sensitive, and B, it can sometimes misrepresent students in it. So you can sort of imagine some of the things when it comes to law, especially when it comes to talking about law and policing and criminology and just crime and deviance in general when we are talking about Black people. So one of the things we are doing to actually help to target this, we are doing a lot of different things, but one thing we are specifically doing for all our academic staff is providing them racial literacy training. Now, this is very, very different from unconscious bias training, because a lot of the time unconscious bias training focuses on sort of all the protected characteristics. So it focuses on disability, it focuses on age, it focuses on sex and gender, but we specifically wanted to focus on race and focus on how our Black and minority ethnic students are experiencing the curriculum and experiencing teaching. So we actually work with a company called Empower My Voice, and they specifically do training focused on students from Black and mixed heritage backgrounds. So it is very specific to the experiences of Black students within the classroom. And that is very important, because what we then aim to do is to create members of staff and train members of staff to be able to have the conversations that that they might not be able to have otherwise. So we do know that within higher education, and even in the workplace, a lot of people with the senior leadership roles are from white backgrounds, a lot of the time white middle class backgrounds. So we are aiming to essentially enable our tutors and our academic staff to understand issues faced by Black students, and sometimes how racial bias within education can impact the grades and the results that students get. And obviously, going all the way back to what I said at the start, all these things then impact the grades the Black students get, which then impact the kinds of jobs they can get in the future, unless we tend to remove the first and 2-1 sort of grades that we usually ask for. So that is it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know that there's going to be a tiny bit of a lag, and I am more than happy to take any questions.
Thanks for answering. Really interesting there. And just as a reminder then, if anyone does have questions, I think if you click stage on the right-hand side, you can see there's a Q&A. So I've seen some coming through. Just as we get a few more, I think, just to call out a few things that I took from that, Master, I think it was really good to see actually the stats at the beginning that split out from Black, Asian and mixed, because I think often, and you touched on this, everyone just gets put into the bucket of Bame, and actually, just as you've shown, often Black people are the people that are missed out in that, and it's kind of like oversight because the others compliments. So overall, we've got this figure, but actually, it's kind of hiding the truth for people from Black heritage. So it's good to see that, and I think just on the 3 points, the student voice, I think that was really key. I think it's interesting because, as you're saying, that people who are often involved in making the decisions for students or whatever, it's really the same. So I work at Lloyds Banking Group, and it's kind of like the same, which is why we set up something similar. But it's a really great way for people to be involved and to influence from within. And I think for me, it kind of not touched on the second point you make around the experience, because I guess getting involved with that complements and gives you skills and opportunities that you wouldn't get from naturally just maybe it's a part-time job or whatever it may be.
Exactly, yeah.
And
it's an interesting thing, because even just saying Black, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about Black international students? Because a lot of the Black international students we get in general are from really high socioeconomic backgrounds. So they don't always face the same issues, or just even looking at the split between Black African and Black Caribbean students and how they then engage with the sector and just engage with employers is very different. So I do always split all my data, not just Black Asian, I split it into Black African, Black Caribbean and Black mixed, because there are differences to be seen there as well.
Maybe. And I think that links back to the student voice, right? Because you need people from all these different sort of areas to be talking to you and telling you stuff for you to know and really understand, and not just be assuming, right? Cool. I'm going to jump to the Q&As then. So we've got a few come through, and I'm going to try and start from the ones that were asked first. So I think your colleague may have touched on this in the chat, but I'll ask it of you yourself as well. So if what you've been talking about here, is it just for specifically for Black students in law, or is it for the business courses that the Uni of Law offer as well?
All of it. And ULaw offer business courses, policing, criminology too. And we are in the process of diversifying our portfolio, because it is called the Uni of Law. So you would assume it is only law, but no, it's across the board. And for the gaps in attainment, it is also across the board as well, across business courses, law courses, everything.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess the good thing is that Uni Law is looking at the diversity across all of those things. It's quite positive that they're being quite transparent and, open up and saying, actually, do you know what, we see there's this at this moment in time, and let's kind of get it sorted. Okay, cool. The next question here is a more general question, I guess, from legal industry. So it's, do you think the legal industry is particularly bad for institutionalized racism?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably the only person, me and my manager. So I did a science degree, and I think with kind of science, you do see it in kind of academia, but it's not as blatant. However, with law, all we sort of have to do is just Google the kind of origins of law and the origins of policing and some of the cases used. And it is sort of entrenched in colonial thought. So even from that, it does unfortunately transfer. I wouldn't say it's the worst sector, but it is definitely there. And there is data if you Google it. One thing that is really positive is that you do have big companies recognizing issues and actually dealing with it. So looking at different schemes, I don't want to name specific names, but what they do is actually look at Black students and look at getting them experience and helping them within that sector. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but it is there, but people are doing things about it, and it is people's whole jobs to actually do something about it, which was never the case about 10 years ago, to actually look at this and say this is a problem and try and fix it. But one thing we do at ULaw is a program called I Belong, and we do get speakers. So the current president of the Law Society is a Black female. So we get them in and talk and get them to specifically talk to our students about the sector, about diversity. So we do have people in there. We just need to sort of spotlight and highlight them to our students. But don't let that put you off.
No, and I think you touched on a really good point in terms of the organisations are kind of reflecting on themselves, and they know they need to be better, right? And I think for anyone listening who's interested in law, there's an organisation that I know focuses on here called Interlaw, and I know that they work with lots of different law or legal organisations to really help on an inclusion front, and there's a specific bit around heritage sort of aspect. But they do loads of different things for people to get engaged with, and I know Daniel over there is working really hard to help some of that stuff. So I've got a question here then. So what impact have you seen since the Bame Advocate Programme was introduced?
It has been, so the scheme started April of 2020, and you can probably think, oh, and then all the Black Lives Matter stuff happened in like June, July. One thing we have seen is a greater sense of belonging between our students. So usually a lot of students, especially if you go to an institution where there are not that many Black students, you can sometimes feel out of place. We are seeing students feel more part of the uni community than before, and we do collect data on this. We do now have a lot of different events and cultural events too that we recognize, because sometimes as well it can feel as if people are being ignored. So for example, Eid and Ramadan is very important to our Muslim brothers and sisters, and sometimes at work it's just ignored, or maybe colleagues do not know that you can't offer someone water when they are fasting. So things like that. And what that has done is enabled people to feel recognized, and that even though you might be in a specific space, you deserve to be included. And we've gathered data on that, which is very, very positive to see.
Okay, thank you for that. I was looking at the different questions we've got coming in. So there's a few, and I know I am conscious of the time, but I am going to go to another question. So this question is, so do you agree that the lack of adequate financial support also contributes to poor results and reduced engagement? And how can this aspect be tackled?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And even when I was a student, the biggest issue I had, I obviously had, things happen, racism, microaggressions, but the biggest issue I had was coming from a low socioeconomic background. And, not being able to do a sort of placement scheme, because I would have had to then do it for free instead of working, but I couldn't work for free because I needed the money. So any employers listening, all of those schemes need to be at least paid, or at least pay for transport. One thing that can be done, so we have a range of different kind of bursaries and scholarships, but specific funds. So we've got digital hardship funds. So now everything's online. You need a laptop, you might need headphones, you might need a mouse. We do help students who kind of are struggling with that. So a lot of different things are happening. It's a little bit difficult because obviously the money has to come from somewhere, but we are currently working, I don't know if I can say the name, I think I can, with the Aziz Foundation. And what they do, they specifically give scholarships to Muslim students as well. So we've got a lot of scholarships going, a lot of financial help, but then also ensuring that even with the BA scheme, creating a course that is flexible enough to fit around students having to work. And I think that is very important, because sometimes, giving someone £1,000 might not actually help if the course is way more expensive than the money you are giving them. So yeah, it's definitely a huge it's a huge issue, and I'm very passionate about it because it affected me as a student.
Sure. Okay. So it sounds like, although it's an issue, there's lots of different support out there, and it's kind of, students, potential students, whoever it may be, should kind of, I guess it's difficult to ask for that help though, right? It kind of it's kind of, sometimes it could be a bit embarrassing. However, ask for it, because you don't really know what's there and what could come your way.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to, conscious of the time, and I know that people want to get to the employee booths and come and ask you questions direct, perhaps there. So I'm going to wrap it up there. So, Fatmata, thank you very much for that, and just opening some of the challenges and some of the stuff you do, no problem. And yeah, thanks to the students. So I think you can go to the employee booths now. On the left-hand side, you see that. And then if you come back here for our next class a little bit later on, which will be JP Morgan. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.